see on screen, we have a great group of speakers this morning, representing all facets of the industry: telcos, operators, broadcasters, pure OTT plays. And so you really have a great chance to get varying perspectives, and I hope we get some interesting discussion and debate amongst everyone up here. So thanks for joining us this morning. And I'm just going to ask our speakers to introduce themselves, and so we'll start right here with Marius.
Sure. Is this working?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Marius Haugen, I represent Get in this, head of development, so I guess I come from the technology side, although I do consider myself a business person as well.
Can you all hear me? Yep. Good. I'm Hans Solheim from Altibox. And I worked with the company almost since the very start, which is about 15 years. For the first few years I worked on the technology side, and that's my background also from the national PPT. Over the last 10 years I think I've been working on the business side, mainly on TV and entertainment distribution. Happy to be here.
I'm Tine Jensen, the CEO of Discovery Networks in Norway and editor-in-chief. For those of you that are non-Norwegians, Discovery in Norway is the second largest commercial TV house, with both an entertainment leg of free-to-air channels and also the whole portfolio of Discovery channels. And we also have a sports leg of the business with the Eurosport channels and large sports rights, which I will come back to a bit later in my keynote.
I'm Henk Eriksen. I think it's fair to say that I ended up in technology by an accident. I'm CTO of Canal Digital. My background is from the Navy and from building oil platforms, and then I gradually evolved into IT and TV technology.
Hello everyone. Is it working? Yeah. Yes, my name is Jerome Frank Settervold. I'm the CEO of Riks TV, which is a digital TV operator in Norway. I've been working in the company for about 12 years, since the start of the company. And I've been the CEO of the company for the last year.
Well, thank you very much. Let's dive right in. The Northern Waves program and sort of the Northern Waves purpose is to create what they're calling an inner circle within our industry. And that entails a certain degree of, hopefully, collaboration as well as, of course, competition. I'm wondering how important you feel it is for the players in our industry to collaborate in order and share best practices, sort of, open the curtains a little bit, perhaps more than in the past, in order to further the growth of the industry? Or has the industry already reached a point where such collaboration, I think, I'm not one for industry buzzwords. I think some people like to call it co-opetition, putting together cooperation and competition. And I think that's somewhat applicable here. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the importance of and the possibilities for media companies, telcos, all of the players to really collaborate and work together to, whether it's, whether or not it means arriving at technological standards or simply best practices, to move the industry forward rather than sort of lend itself to further fragmentation. Can we start with you, Marius?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think in the introducing rounds to this, we had a small email round about this topic, and I think my colleague from Canal Digital was pretty much debating the point at Audeco as well. I think there is a few technical operations that are now so commoditized that they could really be united into one, that could go for any one of us. So of course, well, I'll save the examples for this gentleman, I think. But as a general thing, I think we need to compete on the right things, the things that differentiate us over the things that are pretty much just business as usual. And those things are increasingly design, user experience, the things that, well, search and discovery was mentioned earlier, the things that are besides video compression and such things, rather than in the very much alike, if you will.
I think the market situation with the globalization of the competitive arena forces players in the local market to cooperate. And I think over the last 2 or 3 years I've been to several conferences where everyone is talking about corporations. They confess the need to cooperate stronger than earlier. But up until now I see very little initiative for cooperation. And we have to ask ourselves, is it because of the lack of standardization or common interest in around different platforms and technology infrastructures that kind of still keeps us apart, or is it the fact that the competitive pressure in the local arena isn't strong enough yet that forces the necessary cooperation to take place? I think the technology challenges will always be solved when the commercial pressure is strong enough, right?
My view on this, so like when we did discuss it, is that this industry, and now I'm especially talking about Norway, we have been cooperating for a long time, for years, across content providers, affiliates, other partners. But it's the way of cooperating that changes, and maybe what kind of partners is part of that cooperation. As it is today, we're experimenting a lot. All players are across the value chain, and I think that we are learning a lot from each other, from success and failures. So we can say that that's not a direct collaboration, but it is some kind of, all boats works and the tide rises. What I do believe is for us in Norway to be competitive in a landscape where linear TV viewing is dropping, but the total time spent on video is increasing. Of course, there are players taking some of that shares. It's being like YouTube or Netflix or HBO or others. It could be a lot of new ones. To be able to be competitive in regards to that, especially for the Norwegian broadcasters and content providers, we need to find ways to work together. So I think that will happen at some point. Also, the way that we deliver the storytelling, the way that they really deliver the content need to evolve. It's not only the traditional way of delivering. Younger users demand a different storytelling technique, a different way of delivering. So the layers that needs to be built into the product experience demands partnerships and cooperation across the value chain, and probably in a lot of new angles. Having said that, also I think that we would see potentially some mergers the coming years or months. There's, as we know in the news, one rumor in Sweden about Telia looking into the Bonnier TV. We saw it here in Norway a few months ago, where the TDC group, there were rumors that were looking at the MTG group, and if that had happened, it would have been the first fully integrated media company in Europe, and having the assets of internet and content, internet will always be needed. So that we will see cooperation at many different levels in this industry going forward.
First of all, I think what makes it fun to have the jobs we have is actually that we are competing against each other, because we are all striving to build the best services and to win our customers from each other, and that's what makes work fun. But on the other hand, when we are faced with the global players, which have budgets that we can never dream of, they have development staff that outnumbers us, even if we combine all our forces. I think we have no choice but to collaborate going forward. Historically, we have probably been too fat, too rich. We've had too much money. We have had the luxury of making all the mistakes individually. I think going forward, we need to collectively make those mistakes, share the funding, and find the domains where it actually makes good sense to collaborate. One area where we have struggled a lot to gain traction is within the domain of advertising. We've had it on a roadmap for 4 years. The challenge is that when we're facing Discovery, when we're facing TV2 in Norway, when we're facing Bonnier or TV4 in Sweden, they have different timelines, different specifications, different requirements, and none of them alone are big enough to take the investment to do something that brings this forward. So I think from that example, if we could join forces on both the broadcaster side and the distributor side to agree on how we solve advertising on demand stuff. For instance, setting up a mediation house that sets the rules, the standards, where we submit the profiles, who just manage that on behalf of us, that would make us jump years ahead of the way this is currently going. Another domain where we're wasting money is the way we choose to produce adaptive bitrate for streaming. It's totally ridiculous. All broadcasters are doing the encoding. To them, it's probably not a huge issue. They have 5 channels, 10 channels. The distributors, we have 200 channels, and we all encode them, meaning that all channels are encoded 5, 6, 7 times. And the only people making money on that is the people who sell the equipment. So this is a domain which it's extremely low-hanging fruit. It's something we all have. There is no competitive advantage in ABR production anymore. It could have been a few years ago, but today it's just bread and butter. So we all need to have it. So that's my pitch on that.
I pretty much agree with my colleagues. I think there are pretty much 2 reasons why we should, why we will have more and more collaboration in the future. The first one is what you were mentioning. In the old days, we used to have our own business. It was a silo, it was protected. We're living on good margins, and we're facing increasingly competition. And so we need to be more efficient and find smarter ways to operate and find, synergies where we're not competing. So that's an obvious one. And the second one, I think, is we're going to see more and more complexity and more integration between the broadcast industry and the content provider industry and the distributors. And in order to handle that complexity, it's going to be more and more important to collaborate across the industry. Not necessarily because we want to collaborate between competitors, but for example, Discovery has 6 distributors in Norway. We're probably distributing content from 15 to 20 providers. That's a lot of combinations. And if you want to make things to work at all, for some of those examples that you're mentioning, like ad insertion, stuff like that, it's going to be more and more important to collaborate across, or else it's just not gonna happen.
Right. Many of the things you've mentioned lead me to my next point, which is, of course, we've all heard the number from the Cisco Visual Networking Index that by 2021, video will make up 82% of all internet traffic. Are the systems that are already in place sufficient to handle that expansion in traffic, especially when we talk about adding things like 4K and HDR? If not, what are sort of the weak links in the chain? And how can, and I see this as an area that's ripe for cooperation, kind of like Hank, you said, there's low-hanging fruit where, if there's a certain degree of cooperation and collaboration, those technical challenges that add incremental but significant costs, as I think yesterday we had a pre-conference phone call, compared to the cost of content rights, the cost of delivery is nothing, but it's still an incremental cost that can be saved. What do you see as the weak links in the train right now in terms of delivering this content, and what can be done to solve those problems? Maybe you'll start with Henke from a technical standpoint.
It's the distribution has two main components. One is the backbone, where we do the bulk of the distribution, which in Telenor today already has in the range of 70% video. So the video proportion is not really what's driving this. It's the volume growth year on year, which is in the range of 35–40%. On the backbone part, I think if this growth is steady, it's manageable, simply because it's predictive and you can keep on adding stuff. And then you have the last mile part of the distribution, where of course we are totally dependent on the fiber guys currently to do the last mile. And it's also in this part we know that the end user, the customers, need to pay their fair share of getting the extended bandwidth on the last mile. And as we speak, 5G is tested. That could potentially help also in the not so distant future. But I think congestion in the last mile is where we are most likely to see the issues. And then we will see how technology will evolve. I think from a cost perspective, the cost is not going to evolve linear. We see that new technology comes along, that helps a lot. We see that the existing systems scale. So from a cost point of view, it's not linear there either. So I think it's not plain sailing, but I think it's the way it's currently looking, it's fully manageable, unless you have an extremely quickly growth.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I let him be the expert. I let Henke be the expert on my behalf.
Okay.
Yeah, I think on the network side, Henke is totally right. I think the operators in Norway are doing a pretty good job at handling the increasing traffic. I think the main challenge that we've got is not there. It's on the customer side. It's the Wi-Fi. It's the complexity at people's home, and that you've got so many devices that are connected. The Wi-Fi falls apart. The connection falls apart. That's that place which is the weakest link. And it's probably, I think, all the telco are probably more experienced on the network side than working on the customer premises, and that's where we need to focus more in order to increase the quality of the customers.
I agree with Jerome and Henke also. I definitely think the main challenges are on the last mile, and then including the mobile connectivity that Wi-Fi provides for as the situation is now. Currently 4G is kind of substituting a Wi-Fi connection which isn't stable enough, and hopefully also 5G will play into that equation. But I think also on the standardization side, the Wi-Fi technology needs to mature more to be kind of paving the way to ease the pain on the last mile, because I think also that's where the weak link in the value chain is at the moment. Another factor that I think also will play into the equation is that I think we've just seen the traffic patterns change as a consequence of the operators over maybe the last 12 months been able to provide on-demand services as part of their basic packaging or as part of their major offerings. I think as the on-demand services from the operators becomes more plural, it's going to escalate the traffic patterns towards on-demand and streaming, which again is going to load the network. So you'll have an exponential growth, possibly, which we are at the beginning of. And although I think, as you say, the backbones can, to a certain extent, load it off, and it's predictable, as you say. I think we, as a value chain, and also seen from the content guys or the broadcaster side, underestimate the investment necessary in the infrastructure to actually make that service delivery happen, so that you have a satisfied subscriber at the end of the line.
All right, I'll chime in now. I try to avoid it because I'm not really a network guy, but I see us all having mitigate actions to this. We're very much on a DOCSIS 3.0 strategy. You are 3.1, sorry. You guys have chosen a bit more of a fiber-based part, and that's fine. I think both technologies are capable of dealing with it, because what you do see on the content side is that you don't see this explosive growth of 4K assets coming by. It is, and particularly on live, it's practically unheard of now. So it's, I think we will see what Henke is saying, a steady growth in data distribution needs rather than this exploding thing that none of us want. So.
But of course, one of the challenges is that while over time the growth may be somewhat steady, there are these explosive events like Tina, you're going to talk about the Olympics, live sports events in particular, where the spike in traffic is tremendous. And of course, all we ever hear about is people complaining about the services not working, right? And as I think a number of you have pointed out, rarely is the problem actually in the backbone. It's more often in that last mile, or it's even outside of the realm of the video itself. It's the authentication or something along those lines. But that, of course, is only going to, those live events aren't going away. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how Tina talks about how Discovery has managed that in the Olympics. Let's move a little bit to the content side of things. There's been a tremendous growth in direct-to-consumer offerings across the world, but particularly here in Scandinavia. Do you anticipate we're going to see more of that, or will we sort of see eventually a re-aggregation that will mimic what we've always had in pay TV, and it'll just simply be delivered OTT? Or do you think that consumers are going to get used to having to choose and go through 6 or 7 different services to find the content they want? Tina, let's start with you.
I think that, where we are at right now, there's a gap in the preferred standard. I think what we're seeing is that most young people, or the younger growing up now, they don't have a loyalty to any specific standard. They go for where the content is that they want to watch or interact with. They go to the apps they like at any point in time, the apps they like. If they don't like the app, they don't use it. So we have that on the one side. They're used to that. They're used to different apps interlacing like a non-standard environment. And then we have those that grew up that were used to more like that traditional TV packages and so forth, where that is also changing towards a multi-app environment. And there's of course could be an argument that that's happening because everything is not in one app anymore. I think that for those there's still like an urge and a need and a willingness to pay to get it all in one place, with one app, one user preference, and that you know it if you go into a similar app. But that is also changes. I think that we will probably see both. We would see there coming in some kind of consolidation on OTT platforms and or apps, and we will see that there will still be like fragmentation out there. And also when we talk about this, collaboration, and when does that one big aggregator occur in the market, or will it occur? I think we need to mind that there's a lot of interest that comes into play. One are the content providers, the second are like affiliates, the third are like it needs to both suit the young audience and the older audience, and they have very different user preferences. So I don't think that there's one answer to this, but we will see more coming together, but I think it will still be very fragmented.
Hans, in our discussion yesterday, you made an interesting point, and I like the phrase you came up with, that the pay TV and broadcast industry on one side, and the OTT, for lack of a better term, startups, the new kids on the block. You said they need to examine what principles do you need to lose from the way you've traditionally done business in order to move things forward. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? And it's on the same topic.
I could do that, but because that was the discussion about how to cooperate and what does it take to start a cooperation, right? If you have a strategy and your competitive arena is changing really quickly, are you able to adapt the strategy as the competition changes? And I think that is a fair question. And the larger the organization, the more rigid on the strategy side, right? So I think that's very important to examine, because I think a lot of us that sit around tables like this and have a daily cooperation really on an operational level see a lot more potential and possibilities for cooperation, and maybe we have more challenging discussions internally actually sometimes than we have with our friends and foe, if you like. On Tina's predictions for the future, as an answer to you, Eric, obviously applications are here to stay, right? And they're going to be plural and grow in numbers day by day. But actually, it's a digital TV channel. It's a digital product, the application itself, right? So there's no one-on-one between having a digital product and deciding that you need to have a direct-to-consumer distribution strategy, right? Because the future playground might as well still kind of contain the existing value chain, where you rather preserve your place in the value chain and make your position stronger in the existing place in the value chain, where you have affiliates that aggregates applications and lower the threshold for the consumer to get access to the content that they really crave. And I think that's a future kind of product offering or market situation that isn't on the map for everyone at the moment. Because everyone is kind of putting an equal sign between a digital product, an application, and a direct-to-consumer distribution strategy. And then you need to go app jumping, and you need to sign in to multiple, and you got your iPhone user interface experience. I'm not sure if that's going to grow the cake. And I guess we're all here to try to grow the cake if we can, right? Yeah.
I might be giving away a business secret, but in Canal Digital we have a strategy.
Wait.
The problem with strategies, they're hard to make, and when you've done them, very few people read them. When they read them, they tend to fall asleep. So we have spiced up our strategy document with some quotes to wake up the readers again. And one of the quotes we have in our strategy is, "You cannot fight technology and you cannot fight human behavior." Even though Steve Ballmer laughed at the iPhone launch, it became a success. He couldn't fight it. When I grew up, we had, at the local market, we had a dairy shop, we had a grocery shop, and we had a butcher. Until the grocery store started to sell milk and meat. Then we had only one store. People are lazy, people want it easy. And that's human behavior. And then it's important that we segregate between the means and the objective. The platforms are only the means. People don't care about the broadcaster, people don't care about the distributor, people care about the content. That's why they're there. So I think the direct-to-consumer offerings are very good for the well-educated, specialized user who is very keen on sport or extremely keen on people having sex on TV. Paradise Hotel is very much streamed in our house, and unfortunately I don't get to see it. And then, but if we look at the more general approach, how people behave, it's about having ease of access, having everything available on the plate. We have the a la carte menu, and then when you have the aggregator streaming services, we also learn what you like to watch outside of the specific domains that you may have your sports app or you may have your Paradise Hotel app. So we also have the benefit of aggregating your experiences, aggregating your content, and being better at giving the recommendations. So that's my, I think they will coexist, but I think from a user perspective, the aggregator approach supports human behavior better.
Jerome, did you have something to add?
I definitely agree on the conclusion. I think the aggregator approach addresses a broader segment. But we're going to see more and more content available, and more fragmented content, more and more fragmented consumption of content. And so you're going to see that the same consumer is doing both getting through your service or a discovery service, or even going to the source of the content. So if you want to watch the NBA, you could go straight to the NBA site in the US, or go through the broadcaster, or go through the content aggregator. That could be the same customer depending on which subscription is in, which mode is in. As you heard of the service, a lot of it is going to be about marketing. Are you aware of that is available to you? As you were mentioning, it's a lot about we need to give the right recommendation, and we're in a good place to do it. But the consumers are also going to be exposed to that piece of content through multiple places. And so we're going to see increasing complexity, and our customers are going to be much more shared than we saw in the past.
All right. I think I'll go back to your thing here, because yes, I think you are correct in saying that the younger viewers do tend to go to where the content is, and they have no immediate problems doing that. However, I don't think it's about the problem. I think it's about that being a necessity rather than that being a want. I think there's still a role for the aggregator in this market, and I think that we need to be a little bit cautious about what we deem as a worthwhile direct-to-consumer service. As for the specialized apps, sports apps or whatever, I definitely see the need. However, for general TV, I'm not sure if I see it. And I think that's about, from a strategic point of view, I think that's about the pie that you were talking about, and about perceived unfairness in how we split it. And of course, if we were to collaborate better, perhaps that splittage could be solved by simply making it bigger.
I think we're now moving into maybe the more religious part of the discussion, because this is about belief also, right? And I think it's easy to underestimate human nature as the driving force for choices in the market, really. I agree with everything that's said here, and although we can say that it's really the content that is kind of the key, because that's what people are looking for. If you flood the market with content, how are you going to find what you're interested in? You need a secure hand. You need someone who can actually guide you in the jungle. And in a competitive arena, which is a global arena, the jungle is just becoming more and more complex and dark and difficult to find your path in, right? So maybe content is king, as the content industry always likes to say. But they say also distribution is King Kong.
Right. Now, a couple of you have made references to human behavior and human nature, and how you can't fight human behavior and human nature. But what happens when human nature and human behavior is changing? We've seen a decrease in live linear viewing, which used to be, that was the way people consumed television. They sat down and they channel flipped until they found something that caught their eye, and then that's what they stuck with. Is human behavior changing as regards how we all watch TV? And let's be honest, it's all TV, whatever the technology behind it. Is human behavior changing? Or are we in a phase of experimentation where, as you said, the market has been flooded with so much content that people are experimenting, but ultimately they're going to go back to the same behaviors they've always had? And how do you, in your various businesses, anticipate those changes, or sort of ride the storm out until things go back to normal, even if the means of delivery have changed behind the scenes? Jerome?
Yeah, it's changing quite fast. I mean, what we saw in the last years is that, or in many years ago, is that people were watching TV together. The whole family was watching the same program. We probably don't see that anymore now. So people are seeing their own piece of content on their own device, sometimes in the same room, in the same car. Sometimes when I see, for example, my kids, they're watching both their iPads, 2 programs at the same time, switching between video and games, stuff like that. So this is what we're facing, is that our customers, they're watching more and more individualized content on more and more devices. And so we need to make sure that we're delivering that great experience for them on all those devices, as few limits as we can, and try to work with the rest of the industry to make the business rules easier for the customers. How many streams you can have, and stuff like that. Make it easier.
Yeah, to your question, is human behavior changing? I think it's definitely not. I think we had a first crack at this in the technology-wise, going from, well, introducing PVR. That was kind of like the first order of innovation in regards to opening this this bucket of freedom in content consumption that we see now. And subsequent innovations has added to that. We have catch-up rights, we have direct-to-consumer plays, we have all of these. But you see consumer behavior changing merely because of the tools we make available to them, rather than us changing the latent needs, I believe. So I think people, well, apart from live events, of course, would prefer to see everything on demand.
I think we need to kind of distinguish between human nature and consumer behavior, which are two separate things, right? Human nature are the underlying drivers for your decisions, right? And we think that we are very clever and smart and rational when we take all the choices where we spend money. But marketing people know better, and psychologists know better. So human nature, I don't think, changes that much, but consumer behavior changes because of the availability of the different service offering in the market, and that's distribution, right? So back to my point about the big ape. We need to make the access to good content as easy, as flawless as possible, to keep the customer happy and to make that customer spend as much money on the content that we live off together, because we're still in one value chain, right? And we still have, I think, a necessary place in that value chain also in the future.
I think I agree in most of what is said here. There is a significant change. Traditional TV viewing is dropping. Most of the ones leaving has gone to Netflix or YouTube or so forth, and multiple devices are used and so forth. It's especially the young ones that might have a different behavior, growing up with a different behavior, as I said, than what the older ones have. The older ones might be changing the pattern slightly, not necessarily the core of the behavior, because if you read, through social media that's enabled by technology, of course, that The Crown is a massively good show, that might be the reason why you go to Netflix. So I don't know if that's really change of behavior per se, but this change is happening. Then the Norwegian broadcasters or TV houses have not necessarily been lagging behind, but we haven't been in the forefront like Netflix and YouTube. I think what we've seen now the last couple of years is that we're really picking up, both we in Discovery, the Viasat or the Viaplay and Viafree and the Sumo and so forth. picking up, and we're going beyond that, just mirroring the experience on linear TV. That's one thing. We've been doing that for years, but what is required going forward is also to extend the experience of the product, is to work with the storytelling techniques, and we experience a lot with that. It's about how do we put in, even a show that we mirror from linear, how do we mirror it on digital? Is it just like a one-to-one? Or do we present it differently? Do we cut it differently? Do we add more experience to it? And I think that's a lot where a change in behavior from a lot of the users are, that we really need to realize that that's happening, and we need to lean into that to succeed in the future. So I think, yes, one thing is that we need to adapt to capturing the ones that are going off the typical linear viewing habits, and we can capture a lot of that together in the industry and the value chain. But we also need to lean into the way of the storytelling technique itself.
All right, I have one more question for our panel, but I want to make sure we actually have some time for audience questions this time around. Are there any questions from the audience? And if so, raise your hand, and I believe Owen or someone else from Northern Waves will come around and let you, give you the mic. Sorry to surprise you with that. Or everyone wants to save the questions for the coffee break and lunch, which is fine as well.
Hi, Eric. I think we've got one from Twitter, actually, we can fire across. Do you see consumers paying premium for 4K? Will it be the differentiating factor between the providers, or commodity in the same way as Henke from Kanaldigital pointed out from ABR transcoding?
I'm leaving that to Henke.
Will people pay a premium price for 4K? Are people paying a premium price for premium music streaming? Yes, there are 10 of them. It's not a mass market. So will 4K, I think for probably 80–85% of the people, HD is more than good enough. Then you will see which part of the remaining market segment is then willing to pay for 4K. Some will be. I don't think it's a mass market product. I never see my wife, my dad, go off and pay a premium price for 4K.
But it makes a difference to the product experience, and it's about when do you want to provide that difference in the product experience to your audience. For instance, the Olympics. There could be certain disciplines with Norwegian athletes and so forth. It's like the legacy of the nation to layer that with a 4K experience. 4K, of course, it brings on a better user experience. I think we will have to deliver more of that pretty quickly.
So consumers expect it and want it in certain settings, and you have to be prepared.
Not necessarily that they're asking for it, but it's about how we as providers of content want to stand out. How do you want to build that relationship to the audience?
If you look at retail, one necessary mechanism to sustain the price levels in the existing market is adding more value, right? So 4K, I think, is one of the things that could add value to the experience and sustain the price levels that you have in the market. But can you get more out of the market? Maybe I lean towards Henke on that question, actually. Yeah, for a few guys that needs the horsepowers in the car and never discusses money, sure. But they're not the mass market.
Luke, do we have any other audience questions, or? Absolutely.
Hans Bjarne, you say that it's people like yourselves intend to meet, but you don't meet and coordinate as much as you should. Tina, you say that you do coordinate sometimes. Henke, you say that we must, and we don't have the luxury not to coordinate anymore. I can assure you that it's one of the easiest tasks for me to put 5 of you on stage today. What next?
I can pick it up. I think from my personal experience, what I see in the market, in the local market at the moment, is that we have, on an operational level, I think several discussions with other players in the market, both upstream and horizontal in the value chain, and it's increasing because it's a necessity to discuss challenges, to join forces, to kind of understand where the challenges seem to pair from the other perspective. So compared to just a few years back, I think there are a lot more collaboration on an operational level. Although there's not a established inner circle of trust, we manage to solve things on an operational case-by-case approach instead. And I think that appears much more often now than it used to just a few years back.
I think what's next, that's a bit of a big question because there's many layers to that as well. If we're looking at the Norwegian landscape, we're still in a situation where we now have to kind of defend ourselves also against the global providers coming into the marketplace, or do what Norwegian broadcasters basically do. Attack is the best form of defense. There's quite a increasing investment levels of Norwegian content, really good productions, and also sports rights. That I think will continue to increase because that's needed to stand out in the competition. What I would have hoped would have been like the next wave, but what might not happen in near future, but that probably will happen at some point, is that at this point in time, with many players spending a lot of money on great productions, and we will continue to do that. But that is kind of not the sort that we're still in the traditional sphere of linear fighting each other with the schedules and even scheduling the best content at the same time, and that as a Norwegian industry doesn't really serve our joint purpose when we're fighting against the Netflix and the HBOs. So a hope of like what's next would be that there's some structural changes happening there, but I think that will take time. What I think also could be what's next, what we could see for around TV content, is that TV also go more towards that content as a service. That TV will go beyond, at some point, only being the plain TV experience. And then there's one thing I want to say that we often forget when we have this discussion about, the changes and what's happening and changing consumer behavior and cooperation and so forth. What does not change? And what does not change is that hunt for the good story. Both for the ones that want to provide a good story and those that want to experience the good story. We want to experience a good story, and that does not change. And I think that is quite important to have an eye on when we talk about everything that will change.
Absolutely, Jerome.
Well, I think 1 year ago I probably would have answered that we'll probably meet here next year and we'll still be talking about is it possible to collaborate, and same thing the year after. I think the good news from last year is that now we're hearing pretty interesting things happening in Sweden. Good talks between the broadcasters and the distributors, working on common standards. And I think it's a good news for the Norwegian industry, because my experience from being a French citizen in Norway is that Norwegians don't like to be left behind from the Swedes. So if it's happening in Sweden, it's going to happen in Norway. It's going to be magic.
Henke, anything you'd like to add?
I think the collaboration is starting, and speaking of my own experience, it's when you want to start the collaboration, you try to find who is most like yourself, because these are the domains where you think there will be most commonalities. And those players also happen to be your worst competitors. So the most active, proactive, engaging collaboration that we've had in Canal Digital has been with Viasat within the satellite distribution domain, and We have our full-fledged streaming service. They have Viaplay. So we have definitely been going up and down some avenues together with them to see how we can get some real scale benefits that we can both have a win-win from. And then when we start getting the lawyers into the picture, it starts to get more complicated, because then suddenly there are things you can't do or things they don't dare to do because the competition authorities might think it's not right, or the people owning the content might think it's not right. So we need to sort out these hurdles. But from our part, we definitely have started looking into it.
And Marius, the last word is yours if you'd like it.
Yeah, I think I'm very poorly positioned in regards to the speaker says. I didn't hear your question actually, but in regards to cooperation, I think the operational side of it kind of tends to play out a little bit, like you said, and in regards to the strategic part, I think it's usually a little bit too easy to look at the vertical integration, because that's always the answer. Okay, we just acquire these guys and that's up. It's a little bit of a simplistic play. I would like to see us experiment a little bit with, alternative business models, particularly contract rights, and see if we can solve the question of the money a little bit more agilely than we do now.
Well, thank you very much. Great discussion and lots more to talk about over coffee. And we're going to take a coffee break next. Our next presenter will start at 11:05 or a little bit after, so it'll be more like a 20-minute coffee break than a half hour. Thanks again to our panelists. Let's give them a big round of applause.